I'm just going to talk about branding specifically for small businesses. Um, just a very, very quick, brief intro. I'm a graphic designer. I have been now for 20 years, and I've got two small children. But before them, I used to freelance in-house as well as from home. I freelance for places like Marie Curie, EMAP, Odeon and Pentagram. So I've done quite a broad range of different types of graphic design work in that time. And when I had my children, I decided I wanted to work from home more. And also then I'd moved out of London as well. So I undertook the social media management course from Digital Mums and kind of fell into doing social media for some clients. But I found that I was getting asked to do more design work. And so I kind of made a bit of a call a couple of years ago because I couldn't keep up with social media and graphic design. And I decided a couple of years ago to specialise specifically in logo and brand design, and particularly for small businesses, partly because I noticed on some of the clients' work when I was doing social media for them, the difference it was for those companies that thought about their branding and those that hadn't, and those that hadn't, how inconsistent they were visually, as well as their messaging and their tone of voice, but also just how strong it was when a brand was in place, which then fed into their marketing and their social media posts. And I wanted to be able to help small businesses like myself and like yourself use what the big companies do, which is building a strong brand foundation that they sort of build from and then do their business from. So that's kind of my background and where I am, and part of the reason why I've decided to specialise in this particular area. And you know, and it's so easy to jump in and start a business these days. I think the stats is something like over 600,000 new small businesses start up every year in the UK because it is so easy to do it now with online resources. And what I see with quite a lot of small businesses is that the branding gets overlooked. So, you know, people start up and they launch their product or service and learn how to market it and learn how to sell it. But then the branding catches up at some point because it hasn't really been thought about. So these are just a quick recap of what I'd like to cover in today's session. So just a bit of background as to what branding is, some mistakes that I see people make. There's, you know, I've kind of highlighted 5 key areas that I think most businesses need to get clear on in terms of their visual identity, brand values, why you need to think about yours, how to create a brand positioning statement which acts as your base, as a bit of your steer for your branding, and then a couple of bits with your colours, your fonts, images, and then finally on why branding is about building your audience. And what I'll do, I'll stop in a couple of places throughout the talk because I'm sure you don't want to hear me talk consistently for a long length of time, and take any questions as we go. Or if you have any questions as we go, then please feel free to put your hand up. So what is branding and why you need it? So, you know, when I talk to a lot of people, solopreneurs and sort of small businesses, I think the underlying impression is that small businesses don't need to think about branding, because when people think about branding, they think of the big brands like, you know, Coca-Cola, Nike, Innocent. But what it is with these big ones is that they've built up their brand over the years, which is why they're considered to be a brand. So you can learn from these big examples in terms of these big professional brands, that having that in place increases their longevity as a business and as a brand. You know, and they've worked so well. You can picture Coca-Cola. You knew as soon as you say the word Coca-Cola, people are going to picture the red lettering, the script styling, perhaps some of their marketing, perhaps some of their advertising. The same with Innocent as well. You know, I think a lot of people will be able to picture in their heads some of their visuals and their imagery and their styling behind their advertising and their marketing campaigns. And what the brands do is they work on an emotional level in us. So different brands will evoke different sorts of emotions within us. So Coca-Cola will be very different to Innocent. Nike will be very different to, say, the NHS, for example. Innocent will be quite different to John Lewis. You know, they will bring up different sorts of feelings and emotions in us depending on what sort of experience we've had with those particular brands. So what branding does, it creates a solid foundation for you to build on for your marketing, for your PR, for your advertising. It feeds into everything else that you do and gives meaning behind your business, basically, and what helps differentiate you from other businesses within your industry. So I kind of talked a little bit about the current trend is to launch your product or your service quickly, and you know, I can kind of see the appeal in that, because it seems like quite a lot of work to work on your branding and have a logo and identity professionally designed. Sometimes small startups might not know whether it's worth investing that money at that time. So it is a sort of a quicker and easier way to just launch with resources that have available, and take it from there, rather than kind of spend lots of time and investment and money and energy into having a brand design for you that for a business that may or may not last a couple of years. So what is branding? So I just wanted to kind of clarify, there's lots of different terms in terms of branding. And so a brand, it isn't just your logo, your fonts, your colors, or even your website. That's your visual identity, but your brand will be everything. So it's tied in with your mission, your values, your purpose, your vision for your business, as well as your positioning within the market, what differentiates you from your competition. It's also your tone of voice. It's also the type of language that you use in your messaging and your copy, and it's the type of imagery you use, as well as your fonts, your colors, your logo, and how that then is represented in different sorts of touch points that you experience with your audience. So it's essentially the experience that you are creating for your audience in all the various touch points. And that may be, you know, that could be on emails, it could be on your website, it could be on social media, it can be in advertising material, any marketing flyers. So it's in any aspect that you will come into contact with your audience will affect your brand. And branding is intangible. You can't really it's really hard to measure. And it's quite difficult to kind of pinpoint, because essentially what it is a gut feeling, because it's connected to the emotional level in an audience and a customer, and it's about how they connect with your business. So this ties in quite nicely with this quote, and I think it might actually be a bit higher now, but 80% of people's buying decisions are based on emotions, which is then backed up by about 20% of logic. So this is why I will talk about branding being really important, because that is where it's going to connect with your customer and help those buying decisions for them. So there's quite a lot of different terms that get bandied about, and I just wanted to kind of clarify. So there's logo, branding, and brand identity. And the way I kind of like to describe it is to imagine your house. So your logo is your initial identifier for your brand and your business. So it's the thing that is going to be most recognizable. So it's like the front door of your house. You know, it's going to be quite distinguishable as you look down the street. And then if you were to walk inside a house, you've got the colors that you choose for your walls, or your wallpaper, or the furniture, or the pictures you hang, the sort of lighting that you use. All that is part of your brand identity. So that will be your fonts, your colors, your images, and it's how you style all those different sort of elements together. And then when someone walks into your house, and the feeling they have from walking into your house, that is your branding. So essentially, what you're doing with your brand identity and everything that you've got in control of is you're trying to help guide and steer those people to create the sort of feeling that you want, which is your branding. And that's why I say big businesses have the brands, and why branding is associated with big businesses because it takes years for enough people to come to the same conclusion about that business and that brand, and only then are you said to have a brand. So it's a long-term plan to work on your branding. And you know, everybody has to start from somewhere. So all of these big brands will have started small, but they started about 100 years ago. So, you know, this is why it's important to think about, even if you're a one-man band or a small business, you know, it's about thinking about where your business is heading in the long term. And you've got the capacity to help control some of those associations that you would like your audience to have with your brand and your business. And you know, it's in your best interest, I'd say, to take control of that and help guide and steer people along the right type of route. So, so this is just kind of talking about how we associate with different brands. You know, people will have different choices as to whether they choose Coke or Pepsi or Persil or Ariel or, you know, Fairy Liquid over a supermarket owned brand. You know, why do we make those choices? Especially in terms of washing up liquid, there really isn't a huge amount of difference between them at all. You know, if you're going to be looking at the features and the benefits of them, but the reasons for those choices is coming down to those brand, and in particular, quite possibly those brand values. What aligns you to that particular brand? What sort of values are they portraying within their branding and their identity and their messaging and how you connect with them? You're forming an impression of that particular business. So, you know, you're aligning yourself with one brand over another, and that's the same can be applied to small businesses. And that's how you look to try and differentiate yourself from your competition, so that you are aligning yourself with your target audience based on how you do business, how you present yourself, and also what sort of values you're going to be connecting with your particular audience. So I thought I'd just highlight a couple of things that I see small businesses do. So I've already kind of touched on this, but it's about not defining their brand before starting on their design. So what happens with quite a lot of startups and small businesses is they start, they launch, they market, they sell, they seem to be doing okay, but the inconsistency in terms of their visual identity becomes apparent quite quickly, because if you're not basing your designs on any branding, then you kind of got to ask what you're basing those design decisions on. Whereas if you've looked at your branding first and foremost, it helps to determine the style of your visual identity. So therefore, it gives you a much clearer idea of what sort of fonts you should be choosing, what sort of colours you should be looking at, what your imagery styling is. And when you don't, it just it gives off an inconsistent and sometimes a bit of an unprofessional look to your business. First impressions count. It's something like 13 milliseconds that it takes for our brains to process images. So, you know, that just highlights how important it is to think about your visual identity and what sort of impression you're making with your audiences. You know, we're bombarded every single day, even more so than we were 10, 20 years ago. Now everything is online. You know, our attention spans are far shorter than they used to be because there's so much content. We spend a lot more time on our mobiles these days and in front of our computers. And you're not competing just with other competitors. You're also competing with hundreds of emails, social media notifications, you know, tens of tabs open on people's screens, you know, as well as lockdown distractions, you know, kids interrupting you. So, you know, you've got a really short space of time to be able to make that first impression. And when you've thought about your branding, it really helps to bring that focus in and to make those impressions quicker in your customers' minds. You know, and I kind of said bottom where branding, it gives your business meaning, because when you've thought about your strategy behind the why behind your business, it gives your business meaning and people connect with that. Number two, so I've got here, not using a clear set of brand guidelines. So this kind of ties in a little bit with the first point. So if you've thought about your branding, then you know what sort of style it should take. And what that does, a set of brand guidelines, what it does is set parameters for how you use your brand. So it's not just your visual identity, it will take into account your tone of voice, your copy, any kind of type of brand language or particular keywords that you might use. And what happens with that is that then the more you use all those elements of your brand, the more consistent you are with it, the more it builds trust in your audience. And at the end of the day, people want to feel safe, and branding is part of that because it creates that consistency for them. They understand what to expect from you. They get used to it. They become familiar with it. And it creates sort of a feeling of low risk in terms of dealing with your business. So number three here is designing it themselves. So designing brand identity, brand design elements themselves. And this is more, I suppose, for logos in particular, but a little bit with fonts and colours. I still think there's a lot of value in hiring someone who's got experience and is trained to sort of help you with those sort of aspects of it. And it is, and I understand, it is really easy to do these days. There are so many free and low cost options out there for people to do. You can get a logo done on Fiverr or take one off Canva, and I understand the appeal, I really do, because it means you can get up and running really easy. But my question would be, is if it's taken you 5 minutes to do that, is it creating the impression that you want to leave with your audience? And as we've seen, how quickly people judge in terms of taking images in, is that sort of impression you want to be leaving with your audience, in terms of whether it's professional enough and if it's the right sort of message that you want to be sending out to your audience. And then number four, I've put in here crowdsourcing logo design. So as well as being able to design it yourself, there's quite a lot of sites out there where you can ask lots of different designers to design one for you. You don't pay for it until you've chosen the logo that you want. But what the problem is with these sort of sites is the type of work that these designers do. Because they work for free, they quite often are churning out quite a lot of logos in a short space of time, as well as potentially using work or images that they might not be licensed to use or have been copied from somewhere. And again, that has a potential to look like other people's work. It's not usually individual or unique or with your particular business in mind. And they look quite often like they haven't been thought about. So again, you've got to kind of question what sort of impression that's going to be leaving in your audience. So number five is hiring the wrong person for the job. I'm sure most of us will have heard of someone who knows someone, their nephew, cousins, daughter, or someone who's got some Photoshop skills and able to design the logo for them, or perhaps it's a web designer or a developer who've got a low level of design skills, and it saves them money in the long run to have logo and something else designed for them. And it's not always a bad option. It really depends on that person's experience and what sort of work they've already done. But I would look at hiring someone who's got the experience to do what you need to do for in that particular instance. Have a look at people's portfolios and see what other logos and brand identities they've designed, because quite often, and as I know, I was doing social media and design, I knew I couldn't focus on both industries effectively, which is why I took the choice to go back to graphic design and in particular logo and brand identity design, because they're huge subjects in themselves, to be able to give those sort of skills properly to a client. So when someone's a web designer and designs a logo, it may well be that they've got a strong portfolio, and then that's great. But my question is supposed to just to double check that in terms of experience. So number 6 is creating a brand that business owners like. So design is really subjective. Everybody and everyone will have an opinion on it based on their own likes and dislikes, as well as their own values and cultural references for it. And I understand business owners need to have a brand identity that they like and connect with and want to use for their own business. But there is a bit of strategy behind designing one that then is going to appeal to your particular target audience. So there's a bit of a balance in terms of getting it right with something that represents your business in the right light, as well as trying to attract the people that you'd like to attract. And I see quite a lot on social media with people asking other people's opinions in terms of their new logo, and that's great. You know, get other people's opinions. It's not a problem. But you've got to also question if those people are going to be your target audience, because only then will those opinions be valid. Everyone will have an opinion on your logo and branding, regardless. So you know, it's really key to try to keep it strategic, and that's where the brand strategy comes in place, because then you can align it back to your base and your foundation. And building a brand on one platform, and I'd say this kind of applies to businesses who start up, say in particular on social media. And I don't know, you know, it's a good way to start, because you're trying to gauge interest in your business, if people are actually, you know, interested in what you're going to be selling, and if there's scope for sales and all the rest of it. But branding is everything. So one, you don't own the social media platform. So if anything happens, you know, you're a little bit up, you're kind of a little bit worse for wear, you know, in all that content and all that effort has been put onto one platform. But also your branding, it includes everything. So it's your website, it's your emails, it's your telephone calls, it's your, you know, it's how you write, it's how you come across. So it's important to think about your brand as a whole experience for your customers, as well as treating each individual platform slightly differently depending on how those people use it. Shall I stop for a couple of questions? I don't know if anybody's got any questions or anything on that at all so far.
Yeah, I don't know. Can I exit this screen to the one where we see everyone? So I had a quick question.
Yeah.
Oh, there's Johnny. Hi, Johnny.
Sorry for jumping.
Johnny's. Hi, Ed, as well. So I had a quick question, which is like, when I think about branding, and when you talk about the experience thing, and that really makes a lot of sense to me. But what people are talking about branding, they always talk about the logo, the colours and the fonts. But isn't it really about how you treat people, you know, the conversations that you have with people, whether you answer your emails properly, whether you know, like, so there's this whole focus on getting the right colour for the logo, but like there's this whole other world of like how you make people feel welcome in your business and stuff like that. How does that sit with everybody else, and what do you think about that, Vardy?
Yeah, definitely. So so branding, there's lots of different aspects to it. So there's a lot that's internal, and then external is the visual identity. So your internal is fed into your strategy in terms of, so it's your mission, your values, your purpose, your vision, your USP, what your place is in the industry in comparison to your competition. Then you've got your tone of voice, your messaging, your copy, and that's all done as your base and your foundation. And then what people see, the majority of that will be your visual identity, but everything feeds through. So when you've done your base and your foundation work for your brand strategy, it will feed into your emails, how you speak on social media, how you talk on the phone, you know, and it will feed into everything, work alongside your visual identity.
Yeah, I think that kind of, it's kind of related to what you were just saying, Sophie. I suppose my question is, how do you know if your brand is working?
Yeah.
And is it about canvassing your audience and getting audience feedback? But then I wonder whether an audience has an understanding, because I think a lot of the time when we talk about brand, I mean, we're just recently putting in a funding bid, and we've been asked to kind of get 3 different quotes for branding an aspect of our work. And I think there's a lack of understanding there. I think what they mean is, what's the visual presence of it? So how do you go about finding out what your brand is? Because obviously, I'm sure we all think our businesses are great and we're doing a brilliant job. But yeah, how do we know whether other people think that?
It's so it takes a bit of time, but it will happen with the type of work that you're getting asked to do. Are they from the people that you're trying to target? Are they saying the things about your business that you want them to say about your business? So when you're looking at your brand strategy, you're trying to think about the values that are driving your business. Are they the same values that are connecting with your audience? Is that the reason why they're coming to you? And it comes with a bit of time and also potentially surveys as well, if you wanted to do market research on that lines. But do they recommend you with the type of words that you would use to describe your business? Have they got it? Do they understand what it is that you do? Can they say it in a sentence succinctly? Have they got a clear understanding of what it is, who you help, how you help them? And it is sort of, brands kind of do need a bit of fine tuning every now and again and kind of tweaking. And that they are kind of ever evolving. But the true test is if the people you're trying to target are saying the right things about your business, because then you've got what you intended with the people you're trying to attract.
That's quite a tricky answer. That's quite tricky stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is a little bit when your audience has literally been taken away from you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Although good news with all that funding announcement, perhaps.
We'll see. It'll be the devil in the detail.
I'm sure. If anyone else got any questions, or should we let Vardy carry on? Cool.
Okay.
So I'll let you, can you share your screen still? Yeah.
Yes, I can. So, so 5 key areas that I think you need to get clear on your branding to kind of get started. Number 1 is your mission. So know who you are, what you stand for, what you do, and why you're doing what you're doing. What's the purpose behind your business? And the reason I sort of say this is because that becomes your differentiator between you and your competition, and as well as connecting with your audience, as well as it tying in with your brand story, because and it stops you from being yet another business in that particular industry. And people will connect with your why and your brand story more than what your business is about. So number 2, then that helps to kind of work out what makes you different. So it's really good to try and understand why your audience would choose you over your competition. And that might actually be your mission. It might be your brand story. It might be something else. It might be some other benefits or advantages for hiring you. Maybe it's locality. Maybe it's some sort of referral system. Or maybe it's your particular customer service. Maybe it's something you do in your business. But this is where getting to know your target audience is really key as well, and understanding why they would choose you over your competition. And what you do is you hone in on that difference through your branding. And your typography. So typography, it's got quite a lot of personality through the type of fonts that you use and also how you use those fonts. And that that ties in a lot with your brand personality. So every brand has kind of got a personality basically, and a lot of your visual elements will be tied into that. And typography is quite a big part of that. For example, geometric, sans serif type faces can feel quite clean and modern, whereas perhaps high-end fashion brands, they may well use something that's a bit more elegant. Perhaps they've got more serifs and a bit more contrast between the strokes of their letters. And they're quite different. You can create quite different feels between the different choices of typography and fonts that you use. Colour's highly emotive, so this ties in a lot with brand association. Coca-Cola is a particular red. Tiffany, I'm sure when I say these names, you can picture the colours in your head, and Selfridges as well is that particular yellow and the soft sort of teal of Tiffany's as well, turquoise. 60% of decisions of why people buy particular products is based on colour, and it ties in a lot in your subconscious level and that gut response, which is a really important link to your branding. And then number 5, I've got imagery, and I've put this in because it's a really big part of your brand identity, and it's not just the choice of the images, it's also the story that you tell within those images. If it feeds in with the rest of your brand story and the type of look that you're going for, as well as suiting the rest of your visual identity. And it's also the styling of those imageries as well. You know, you can have, there's a lot of scope that you can have here as to whether perhaps images are clean and crisp and clear, or whether some are a bit more earthy and warm and muted. You know, there's lots of different feelings that you can evoke with the type of images that you choose. And also whether illustrations and icons, you know, and how that feeds into supporting the rest of your visual identity. So keeping to a certain brand aesthetic, and images are a big part of that.
I think that's a big problem. Well, not a big problem, but the fact that you want a consistent visual identity, your images really reflect what your brand stands for. If you use, for instance, lots of different photographers, or you use some phone images paired with photographers' images, the contrast is just so stark, it ruins the consistency. So, you know, we work with Sam, who's a photographer, and he does a lot of work for brands, and he does their entire social media. He does all the images that go through that brand, he's in control of, and they're in his style. And if they're not, it almost looks really obvious, and he won't post anything. So it can be really difficult for people, especially that aren't handy with a camera or don't have, you know, it's as important as your branding, because, you know, if you've not got the images to back it up, you just look amateur. And that can be extremely expensive. If you don't have a friend, basically, or somebody that can do these images for you, you're just going to look at amateur. So you've really got to finding the right photographer, or learning and becoming, you know, decent, and finding your sort of your look and feel through your imagery is key. It's just as important as the logos, the typeface, and everything else. So yeah, and I think that's a big struggle for small brands, because they are so visually represented on social media nowadays. It's just so easy to ruin it at the first step, because you've taken a photo yourself. But people think, well, what else can I do? You know, they can't afford to pay a photographer every week to update their content. So I think that can be a real sticking point for people. Just thought I should stick my ideas in there.
I really noticed that with Johnny's pictures for Fallen Giants. So like he does really lovely pictures, and they do really tell me more about his business, or, you know, it seems to all fit together very much. But that's partly because Fallen Giants is an expression of Johnny's personality. So I think Johnny's pictures really always make the point that they, you know, tell me more about his business. I've seen that there, but I think that's really daunting.
You've got to be multi-talented. That's the thing.
Can you see that one?
We can, yeah. Looks good.
One simple thing is to always think about the background. So I'll always have a white or grey background, and that's a good way to create at least consistency.
Yeah,
that's a good idea.
You're right. It can be really expensive and difficult, but there are some simple things you could do. If you always set up, I suppose I'm always talking about. I make a product, an object, but yeah. So just keep the background consistent. That's
a good topic for another lunchtime talk. How to cheat at photography.
Yeah. But it is difficult, right? It is tricky. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it is really tricky, and I think I would always recommend to my clients to have some brand photography taken, even if it's a couple of hours or a half a day, and they end up with 5-10 images, you know, whatever the case may be in terms of their budgets and things. But at least they've got the hero imagery as such, you know, for using the website. And And then it is, you know, it is kind of choosing particular stock imagery as well. And there is a little bit of an art to it, and to not be able to choose everything that everybody else is using as well. And it's also selecting ones that support your story, have the right look, have the right visual look, you know, and like when you were saying about whether the backgrounds need to be busy or clear or particular colour. So there's lots of things to think about, and, you know, ways that you could potentially get around it without it being an expensive photo shoot all the time. Because if you were able to afford, say, 5 brand photographs, then you can use them on your website and, you know, and kind of rotate them a bit with other supported imagery throughout your social media. And I think, you know, I kind of do stock, brand and graphics basically for my clients, so that they've got enough of visual content to keep them going. But yeah, it is tricky. You know, no, I don't know many small businesses have got the budget to have a brand photographer and have new photos all the time, but it's a huge part of getting it right as well.
I have actually got a brand photographer coming to Harland Works next week to have a look at using it for a location, and then she does like multiple shoots on one thing. So I think there are ways of trying to do that if you can't take as nice photos as Johnny does. Like me, I can't.
Okay, great. Let's go back. So I thought I'd touch quickly here on a brand values exercise. And I don't know if anybody has already done this. I know, Ed, you said you've done a little bit already. But the way I kind of, I work in terms of sort of designing visual identity, aligning it to your top three values. And what that does is it keeps you more focused in terms of what your brand and your business is about. And it also ties in with having a personality for your brand. And why I talk about personalities is because people kind of connect with brands like they are people. So it's quite good to try and get an idea of what those characteristics will be. You know, and there's lots of things you can think about, whether you're serious brand or a fun brand, or whether you're elegant or a bit more raw or formal or casual. And it's all tied in with how you would like to come across, as well as what's going to resonate with your target audience. And then those values feed into your messaging, tone of content, as well as your visuals. So what I suggest, and I don't know if anybody's already kind of done these sort of exercises before, is to think about 40 words and adjectives that describe your business. And I try and steer clear from the really obvious ones like professional, because I don't know anyone who doesn't want to come across professional. So it's really thinking about those kind of descriptive words. So whether you're a bit fun or quirky, or you're bright or you're eccentric, you know, and really sort of try and get a list of about 40, because I find that does help to just forces you to think about the words a bit more, because I think most people can come up with maybe 10 or 15 quite quickly. But to carry on just forces you to think that little bit more about what potentially your brand is about. And then what I say is cut that in half to 20, top 20, cut it in half to the end to top 10, and then drill that down to what you think the top 3 really sum up your brand, and that can potentially then connect with your target audience. Then what you do, you have those top 3 values. They're easy to remember with just 3, rather than having lots. You have 3, because essentially most brands will come down to just top 3. You know, and already if you were to use quirky, innovative and creative, I don't know about you, but you know, that brings up different associations in my mind compared to something that might be simple, easy and clear. You know, simple, easy and clear might be something like IKEA. They're a bit more sort of normal and everyday. Quirky and innovative, I can't quite think of one at the top of my head. Maybe it's kind of edge off like Red Bull, though I think they would be more adventurous and daring. But you can see how suddenly, you know, you can pretty much use 3 as your top three words as your brand values. That helps steer then what your look is going to be for your brand, what your messaging is going to be like, and it's you know, you can kind of keep them front of mind for everything that you do in terms of your brand. And there's something else I do with my clients is to have a brand positioning statement. And what that does, it just adds to sort of having that base with your top 3 brand values. So you've always got that to come back to, and that everything else kind of feeds off with it. So the way I start off with is, you know, who you are and what you do. And this is pretty straightforward for most businesses. Then you go, who needs to know? And I don't know if people do this already, but to create a client profile of, you know, basics of what that person is, who they are, what they're into, what their likes and dislikes are, what their lifestyle is like. And then why should they care? You know, what makes you different? What's going to connect them to your brand and your story? And what those questions do, they help to shape your story, your messaging, and your visual identity, and acts as your foundation as part of your brand strategy. So for an example, this is what mine is. So I've got here, I'm at the Branding Fox, so that's the name of my business. And I provide logo and brand solutions. That's what I do for my customers, ambitious and motivated business owners. And my why is so that they can be confident of their brands and they can go out and share them and sell more work and connect with more customers. So along with your top 3 brand values, I use this as a steer to kind of always come back to as my base, you know, and it kind of just has that there as a sort of a key for you to kind of move forward with in terms of your connecting with your why and then your target audiences as well. So I've just got a bit about designing your color palettes. So I've already said color is quite emotive and an important consideration in your brand identity. And by using your brand values, you can then use them to select your colors, fonts, and your imagery as well. And, you know, and some of it will be subjective. So, you know, you might have different ideas of what those values mean visually compared to somebody else. So one good way to sort of start is to build, you know, like a mood board, for example, in Pinterest, and, you know, literally just put in your brand values in Pinterest and see what comes up. And it should start, hopefully, get you some ideas of a collective look, potentially, for where your brand could be heading. It's not everything, obviously, because it's just a bit of a starting point. But it's also quite good to think about how your colours will be used. So, you know, you might want to think about your primary colours, which are the main colours that you'll be using for your brand and what people will recognise for your brand, which might then need to be supported by secondary colours. You might need that more for supporting imagery. And actually, I didn't talk about that, but hero and supporting imagery works quite nicely with primary and secondary colour palettes as well. And it's the elements that are going to support the main part of your brand. Because, you know, if you, for example, if you've got lots of bright colours in your branding, you might not want to be using bright colours all the time. They'll need to be supported by some other colours to help tone them down and make them more easy on the eye. So there's different ways, basically there's different ways that you can use your colours and different percentages usage as well, and the relationship between each one's within your colours. But if you're using a designer, then they can obviously help guide you on this. But I always say, you know, start with 3 to 5 to begin with if you're doing it yourself, and just get used to using those colours until you feel comfortable to mixing and matching a bit more. So this is just quite a quick reference guide and types of common associations with colours. So red kind of, you know, it's very much sort of, you know, it's highlights danger, stop, take action. And orange is a bit more, you know, it's energy, sort of happiness, vitality, gets used in the health industries quite a lot. It's also quite eye-catching as well. Yellow is more happiness. Sunshine can also be associated with children and primary colours. Green is sort of new beginnings, abundance, quite a lot with nature, obviously, and organic products as well. Blue is quite calming, and, you know, these are all kind of quite mainstream common associations. There is also differences in the types of tones that you use within these colours, and also, you know, sometimes using colours that aren't necessarily associated with what you want it to be associated with, because sometimes can be used as a way to attract attention within a particular industry. So if green is normally used for healthcare products, you know, perhaps as if you're an innovative brand and perhaps you know, someone who wants to kind of disrupt the market a bit, you might actually think about using something totally different that's not really associated with that. So there's lots of different ways that you can use colour and their meanings in your branding. So I've got here a list of resources, and I'm happy to share this with you, Sophie, as well, if it's useful. And these are more for if you're looking at creating your own fonts, colours, and choosing your own images. So FontPair is a site that uses predominantly Google fonts, and they look at pairs of Google fonts basically together and which ones kind of work. So it's quite a good reference for picking up, you know, fonts for your heading, your body for text, for example, and being able to see them side by side and sort of kind of running through what you like. And then I've put here, you know, fonts. Google fonts are free, and they've got loads on there now, and you can kind of search within the different styles, whether you want display or handwriting or sans and serifs. So they're quite useful links. Colours, I've put here Colour Adobe, Coolers. Those are really good for getting colour palettes. So the Colour Adobe one I use, and you can have a look at, if you put in a key colour, you can then choose whether you want to have a look at analog colour palettes, triad, sort of monochromatic, complementary. There's lots of variations for you to sort of have a look and have a play around with. Pantone's good because it's the colour industry standard, and they tend to have a Pantone colour of the year, so it's quite useful to look at for trends. Pinterest is great for colours because there's lots of accounts on there that will look at colour palettes that have been matched to particular colours in imagery as well, and that's quite good for styling and seeing how those colours work in different images and potentially try and visualise what that might look like for your own brand. And then I've put in here Creative Market. Creative Market does fonts, images, and lots of other sort of mock-ups and sort of bits and pieces as well. But it's quite good for fonts because as much as Google fonts are great because they're free, you might want to think about paying a small fee for a bespoke font for your own brand that doesn't look like everybody else's. And then these are sort of my recommended and go-to image libraries because they tend to have quite a good selection in there, as well as ones that aren't always commonly used by other people. And then I'm a bit conscious of your time, Sophie, so I've got one last section that I was going to talk through, but I don't know if you want to stop for questions or...
What do people think? Should we run through the last bit, or should we just stop here and take a few more questions? How do people think? What do you think would be helpful? Sally and Bob, you've not said anything so far. What's helpful for you?
I'm okay to carry on.
Yeah, continue, I'd say.
Yeah, carry on.
Okay, so last section. I just wanted to tie it up with why branding is about building your audience. And this quote I came across kind of sums it up for me. You know, great brands are like friends. You encounter a huge number of them every day, but you only remember the ones you love, you know, and it ties a little bit back into the beginning where I talked about why you choose certain brands over other ones. You know, it's because you've built up a relationship with those particular brands over the years. And I've just got a picture just listed here, the brands that I encounter on a daily basis every morning. And it's all within the space of about an hour, you know, and that's, how many have I got there? 3, 6, 9, 12, so between 12 and 15. And that's how many brands I come into contact with in my first morning or, you know, hour of waking up. So I suppose what I'm trying to highlight here is how much of these decisions we are making subconsciously. You know, I've chosen Braun for my toothbrush. I've chosen Colgate. That is my toothpaste brand. You know, Orla did my towels. You know, we've chosen all these, we've made these choices, you know, sort of subconsciously for brands that we love over the years. So and it's, you know, and that's just one morning. So if you imagine if you were out and about on a typical day, how many brands that you would come into contact with, you know, it's just hundreds, potentially thousands, you know, in some instances as well. So it's just highlighting the importance of what the job has for a brand to do. And what I really wanted to tie it in with is connecting with your target audience. And Seth Godin talks about it a lot as well, about building your tribe. And it's become even more apparent now with social media and small businesses starting up. You know, there's a lot about personal branding out there at the moment, and there's a lot about identifying with those people as their brand, as well as big brands as well. You know, big brands have had to stop pushing content to us, and they're more about putting the consumers at the middle of that brand, because essentially it's the consumers that are now controlling brands. It's no longer enough for them to say, we're great, we're brilliant, these are all the benefits that you're going to get from choosing us. It's now about the lifestyle. It's about what they can do for that particular person. And you can see that with social media, because you know, consumers become active in participants in brand building on social media. Everybody's got access now to the big brands via social media. It's no longer this distant thing at arm's length. You know, we can connect with them on our phones right now if we wanted to, you know. So that's a really, really important part of how brands are evolving. They've changed from being these big companies that you can't touch to being on a level, you know, you can tweet the President of the United States if you wanted to, you know. it's that smaller connection now. So it's so it really is about putting the audience and your target audience, particularly your ideal client, at the center of your brand, and building a brand around that and connecting with them through your why, through your mission, through your values, and building on that relationship as you build your brand. And that's when you know you've got a brand that connects with your audience, is when you know you're attracting the right type of people and they're saying the things about your business that you want them to say, and are aligning with their values, and they're, you know, they can understand your brand story and connect with it in various ways. So so yeah, that's that. I'll stop my share. So yeah, I don't know if anyone's got any questions, or I've had enough of me talking. Yeah, I don't know.
I find the branding really difficult to get my head around, but I like your house analogy and the thing about going through the front door and then how you feel when you're in there. That makes a lot more sense to me. But I do think it seems really daunting, and I think coming from your perspective as somebody that's like, you know, that's your specialism, the idea of like getting it all right on top of everything else is kind of like, oh my god. So
it can be a lot to think about, and I think trying to do it yourself as a business owner is a lot to think about, you know, which is why I've sort of tried to pull out the key bits, you know. So if you know what your brand values are, and you've started perhaps even creating a bit of a mood board and understanding your why behind your business, those are really crucial parts of your branding. Then, you know, and the other things in terms of getting your visual identity, then yeah, it's great if you're able to work with a designer, but you know, these are the sort of things that you can do before you've got that option.
where does that leave you, Sally, thinking about branding for your did you say it was a counselling practice?
It's a counselling training organisation.
Yes.
Yeah, it just leaves me with lots to think about, really, and to sort of reflect upon and process a bit. But I think it's really interesting how it goes across the whole board. You know, it's not just the logo or website, but it's emails and it's fonts and colours as well.
Yeah.
And I think a lot to think about. But it's been really useful and really helpful. Some really good pointers. So thank you, Bardi.
Oh, good, I'm glad. Yeah, I don't want to kind of overwhelm people, but I think my point is to kind of just make it clear how much of an impact it can have. So, you know, and all the different parts that it touches, because I think because a lot of people jump into marketing and selling their products, I think what I find happens, I work with a lot of clients, for example, who have been in business for a year and a half, maybe 2 years. So they haven't thought about their branding up until that point. And what happens, they get to there and they kind of realize, I just don't look the part, you know, and they can't always quite put their finger on why. And it's because the branding's not there, you know, but, you know, and I know it's like it's small businesses. There's so much to do, isn't it, when you're starting up? And it's not always, you know, people don't always know what to focus on their attentions first and whether it's worth it when you're starting up sometimes as well. But I suppose my point is, I think everything feeds from branding. I think when you've got that as your base, then you know what your visuals are going to look like. You know what your marketing should be. You know who you're trying to target. You know, you kind of know what you're about a bit more. It just gives you that clarity and that focus. And also it forces you to think about those things, because if you haven't thought about why you're in business or who you're trying to target, I don't know, you know, you kind of got a question. You've got other questions that come up. Do you know what I mean? In terms of what you're running in your business.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point about if you ask your customers or you ask your audience what they think your business is about and see what they come up with. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
People are always telling me what Harland Works is about, and it's kind of like, oh, that's interesting. You think that, yeah.
Hopefully, good, Sophie.
But I have no idea they've got that conclusion. Johnny's asking in the chat.
Can you change the branding as you go? So you push to get right for first time. Yeah, I would say it tweaks. So I've tweaked my branding recently, and they're not massive changes, but I think, you know, brands do evolve. You know, you think about the big brands that have been around for years. I don't know if people are familiar with the evolution of the Shell logo, for example, and how that's changed. You know, and trends change as well. So hundreds of years ago, logos would have been quite detailed, and you know, it would be more about serving your customer in terms of telling them the features and benefits. Whereas now, brands are a lot more. The logos, particularly, need to be a lot more fluid. They need to be able to work on so many different mediums, and that's where you can see a lot of the big brands are rebranding to more flat type logos. They're still the same brand, because essentially, you know, I think I came across this quote a while ago about Coca-Cola and how if they took all their products off the shelf or something, you know, people still remember what Coca-Cola was about. But if people's memories were wiped, their business would go under. So basically what's that trying to tie in with is it's those associations that we've built up with that brand over the years. So even if they have a brand refresh and do a completely brand overhaul, one, they'll probably get a load of backlash from their consumers because, like, what you're doing, you know, and Gap had that when they tried to redo their logo a few years ago. You know, people don't like it. But you can make tweaks and you can evolve as you go, you know. But I think if you built the base and foundation, that will pretty much stay, but you might find your audience change slightly, or might find you need to target a slightly different audience. So it's quite natural to evolve rather than a complete overhaul, unless you're kind of changing business tactics.
I think when you start out, there's a big pressure to get everything absolutely right. And until it's absolutely right, you can't release it. Then, I speak from experience, I spent at least a year just tweaking tiny things. Oh, it's not ready yet. It's not ready yet. It's not ready yet. What do you think about just getting it to a certain stage and go with it, with the idea that you will change it as you need to? Do you see what I mean? Otherwise you wait forever and you never do it.
Absolutely. I think there's a load of value in getting it, say 75% there, and just going with it and testing it. Because the whole thing is with brands as well, because you don't know if it's working until you've been using it for a while. So you might be holding on to it because you want it to be perfect in your mind in terms of what you want it to be and what you want it to look like. But when I used to work for design studios, for example, I worked on the Axel Noble rebrand many years ago. But what we did is we had the logo and we created all the brand identity pieces, but you don't know what's going to go into guidelines until you've designed the stuff. So you don't know how the brand is going to be used until you've actually put it into action. So there's a lot of value in getting it at least part of the way where you want it to be, use it, see what's working, not working, because you don't know until you start.
Yeah, you got to test it. I guess. Yeah. I hear you. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Cool. That's really great, Radeep. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
When you've got kids at home and work to do, and it's really thank you so much.
No worries. No, it's been great. Thank you. I hope everybody found it useful and kind of got what they wanted out of it. That's kind of that was my main aim. So hopefully that you got something out of it anyway.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to get in touch with you directly, your website is The Branding Fox, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Which is such a great name.
Great stuff.
All right, thanks.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Nice to meet you all. Take care. Bye.